All right, here we go. Right, 1 minute past 10. Welcome everybody. Hope you're all well. Welcome to this morning's Audit Scrutiny Committee, Wednesday 24th of March. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Apologies from Councillor Malone, Chair.
Councillor Malone, okay, thank you very much. Minutes of previous meeting. Are people happy with those and happy to approve them and sign, and for me to sign them? And any objections to that? Are we happy? Okay, I think we're okay for that. Chris? Thank you.
Yep.
Brilliant. Item 3, any declarations of interest? No? Okay. Any public questions? No? One day we'll have loads, it'd be great. Item 5, any member questions? No member questions. Okay, in that case, we'll go straight to item 6, the internal audit report. And that's the Audit Manager. Welcome, Sue.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everybody. This report is, if you're following the agenda pack on the internet, this starts at page 5 in the pack. It's just a short report from me. It's the internal audit update, just to show what audits have been completed recently. And it's very much continuing the theme from December, in that we've been largely busy with more grants. As the various lockdown grants are released, we get involved and we look at them, make sure the controls are in place and test check them. In addition to that, we've done some of the bread and butter core systems work, namely the main accounting and the payroll audit. Payroll has been completed and is at draft report stage, and we have a debrief with the auditors this afternoon, and main accounting is largely complete. So even though it's a fairly reduced plan this year due to the COVID grants, of the main core system financial audits, the main accounting and the payroll are probably the ones that we would want to see completed most. And these can be shared with external audit as well, in case that helps with their final accounts work. So the table on page 6 shows you where we are with the audit work and the plan that was brought to members in March last year. And in addition to that, I just wanted to add some of the other things we're working on. We're just about to start this year's governance review, because as members will recall, you will be required to look at the annual governance statement at the next meeting. So we're doing a lot of background work in preparation for that. And part of that involves gathering assurance from all service managers as well, to feed into both my annual audit opinion and for yourselves for the annual governance statement. We're doing work on fraud as well, counter fraud. We've received the results of the National Fraud Initiative now, the National Data Matching Exercise, and we're working through those to identify any fraud or error, mainly in the council tax, benefits and our creditor systems. It also looks at housing tenancy fraud. It looks at the Devon Home Choice waiting list and matches that to other sources of data. And new for this year will be the COVID grants. So that's another significant piece of assurance we get over having paid the COVID grants correctly. So the investigation of those matches are in progress at this present time. And a fraud risk analysis. We maintain a risk analysis for all services within the council to show where the potential frauds are and what mitigations are in place to counter them. And this is about to be shared and refreshed with the management team, just to raise awareness and ensure that we're on top of counter fraud controls and corruption across all council services. So again, these aren't areas that are actually listed in the report, but it's just background work that's ongoing. So we will be on target to issue an annual opinion in the usual way at the next meeting. It will be slightly different in that it will call on other sources of assurance to supplement the audit work that's been done, but that will be made very clear in the report that's brought to you to the next meeting. And happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sue. yeah, a difficult year, and I think well done to everybody involved. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Sue?
You happy where
Chris,
you want to?
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah. Do you want us to raise our hands, or do we just keep off mute and just come in with a small committee?
Well, I can see you all. So if you want to just raise your visual hand, that's probably quicker. So if you go, Chris, first, Chris, and then Bill. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. You're happy with where you actually are? Are you? You've done 9 good, 1 excellent, and you've still got 10 to do. Do you feel you're up to speed and got plenty of time, or are you struggling, or what have you?
Yes, it's a good question, Chris, because obviously there is less audits completed this year, and it has been a unique year. And what this doesn't capture is the assurance I'm able to draw from other sources in the council that I'm involved in, various groups, and I suppose just by virtue of being internal audit as well, I'm involved in a lot of areas that I can see, for example, the council's recovery planning, the corporate management team, the IT requirements board. They're all controls, if you like, that are happening to contribute to good governance. So I think collectively, when you look at the bigger picture and bring all that together, which we will do for the annual report, we are on track. In terms of the individual audits, the creditors, the council tax and the housing finance audits haven't been completed, but we're going to prioritise those through April and May at the beginning of the new audit plan. And we're just looking at how we're going to resource that now in terms of going forward to make sure that next year audits are delivered on time by the end of the year. This year's been slightly unique. But next year, we're looking to possibly increase resources to make sure that we can deliver everything that's required. But personally, I do feel comfortable with what's been achieved. Certainly happy that we've given the attention we have done to the COVID grants, because that was a key requirement of government that we did that. And the BEIS are just reviewing councils' fraud assurance plans at the moment, and I'm aware that some councils have been followed up for additional information where BEIS consider they haven't done enough. So thankfully, touch wood, we haven't been contacted yet, so I'm hoping that the effort we've put into that has stood us in good stead in that respect. So yes, personally I'm happy, even though there's a couple of gaps there. I'm confident we will fill those soon in order to deliver the annual opinion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Bill, you had a question.
Good morning, everyone. Yes.
Morning.
And yes, Sue, I can obviously imagine how hard work it's been for the last year. And it must be incredible to try to cope with it all. My question is, I don't seem to have got any actual reports for internal audits for quite a while now. No doubt they've been completed. Maybe I'm not accessing
Yes.
right, but I can't see any since Christmas, as far as I can see. But other people might have received some or whatever. But now, if we could get some, that would be wonderful. With regard to the COVID grants and things, it frightened me this morning just to see 36.1 million, whatever it was, fraud nationwide or whatever it is. Agreed. I think that's probably a great understatement. But situation with it is yes, we're doing and obviously paying to the right people as far as possible, and we check for fraud as we go out. But then, serious crime might well be involved with this sort of stuff, which are very convincing. If in fact additional fraud is found in the future, are we responsible for having paid it erroneously, or would it be something greater that might take responsibility for the amount of money that's been lost through it or whatever?
Yes, that's a very good point, Bill. The onus is on us if a grant has been paid incorrectly, because let's not brand everybody as a fraudster. We have had a couple just through possible misunderstanding that have been claimed when they shouldn't have done. So it can just be pure error as well, and error on our part. So where one has been identified, the onus is on us to put recovery measures in place as we would any other debt. So we would raise a debtor account for that and pursue the recovery of the monies ourselves. I will check what would happen. I mean, thankfully, in terms of Teambridge, the fraud and error level has been very low. And I think of the two significant ones I can think of, one actually repaid as soon as it was highlighted, and one's repaying gradually by instalment. So the onus is definitely on us to recover in the first instance. What would happen if that wasn't successful? I will check and get back to you. Don't know off the top of my head.
All right. So
That's a really good question, because this is uncharted territory and we're not going to know for quite some time how we might have been impacted by this kind of fraud. As you say, we've very little of it in Teambridge so far. We're very lucky, I think.
Yes, and the National Fraud Initiative will be very telling, because that's what we don't have. We've checked everything within our power that we could do, that we have access to. So, you know, whether it's a bona fide ratepayer, we've used what they call a spotlight tool, which helps you check with Companies House that it is a registered business. But the one thing we can't do is easily check with other authorities, because one of the conditions is that they're not supposed to claim if the amounts given to them are going to take them over the state aid limit. But of course, we have no way whatsoever of checking that without knowing what they might have received elsewhere. Whereas the NFI, the National Fraud Initiative, that will do. So we're keenly looking forward to seeing what results come back from that. Just to that's like the missing bit of the jigsaw for us, and we'll be ready to attack those matches when we get them. Just to see, that once the NFI is completed, it's very unlikely that anything else will be discovered in terms of fraud. We've got our whistleblowing lines out there. If a member of the public or another business wanted to raise an alert, we've done our own checks. So the NFI is just the last piece of the jigsaw, really, and then we should have a true picture of whether we've any more frauds out there.
right.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. That's good. Does anybody have any more questions for Sue? No, we're fine. Thank you very much, Sue. Are we happy to note that report? Everybody happy? Yeah.
I just have a
Happy.
proposal and seconder, sorry.
I propose that we note it. Do I have a seconder? Lynn? Councillor Goodman Bradbury, thank you very much. That's great. We'll note that report. Thank you, Sue, for that. Okay, item 7, which is page 9 on your agenda pack. Financial instructions and contract procedure rules waiver report.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, that's me again. So just routine monitoring reports to tell you which waivers have gone through since the last meeting. There's 3 on there. Low carbon study for the local plan, direct appointment to update the low carbon evidence that's required for that. Future high streets work. We had to remodel our bid for a lesser amount, so we had to reappoint Hatch Generis to do that for us. And lastly, the district heating project for South West Exeter. It's our due diligence on checking the costings and savings assumptions, and that was funded by Bays. So just the 3 waivers. Actually, one's come in since I wrote this report, but we'll carry that one forward to the next meeting. That's purchase of a tractor for the Rangers at Dawlish Warren, since they had a fire.
For those watching and not in the know, what's Bays?
Yes, that's, I have to think myself, actually. It's the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. So it's the arm of the government that give us the majority of the funding for anything business related. So Bays have overseen the COVID grants and quite a lot of the high street and business regeneration projects.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions on that report? Okay. Are we happy to note? I propose that we note that report. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Rollison, thank you. Okay, that's item 7 noted. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item 8. Sorry, did someone say something? No? Item 8, annual audit letter. Julie, hi, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you all doing? Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Chair. Before I go into our, I think we've got the next couple of items on the agenda. Before I sort of go into those, I just want to take the opportunity to introduce your new audit manager, Gail. I don't know if Gail can give a wave. I know you're a little bit sort of dark in the photos there, but we do talk about it in our progress report later in the agenda. But just to sort of introduce to the committee why we make that change, and a lot of this is linked to some of our internal rotation requirements that are needed within the audit team, and that's partly linked to independence requirements, so as to make sure that we fulfill our independence requirements in accordance with ethical standards. We have to routinely rotate both our managers and our engagement leads across our audits, and whilst Teambridge wasn't necessarily due for a rotation, because of rotation requirements in some of the other audits in our portfolio, as a result of just shifting some of those around, we've had to realign some of our portfolios for some of our managers. So effectively, Gail Turner Radcliffe has now come in as your new audit manager to replace Andy. Andy Davis. Gail brings a wealth of local government experience, and I work a lot closely with Gail on a number of audits in the past. So I'm sure she's very much looking forward to working with you. But I don't know, Gail, if you just want to say a very brief hi, and then I'll go specifically into the agenda.
Sorry, I couldn't find the unmute button then. So yes, so my name's Gail. As Julie said, I've been working as a manager in Granthorpe now for quite a few years. So I've got a couple of years of public sector behind me, and I have been working closely with Julie and some of the other engagement leads as well. So look forward to working with you all.
Thank you, Gail. So in terms of the item on the agenda, item 8 is the annual audit letter. So the annual audit letter is effectively what brings the 2019-20 audit year to a close. So there's nothing new in terms of new findings or new information in the annual audit letter. It is effectively meant to be a sort of a more public-facing summary of all of the audit activity that has previously come before this committee in previous meetings. Obviously, the bulk of our work is around the work we do with the accounts, and also a value for money conclusion, which was presented to the Audit Scrutiny Committee back in October, and then the final position went to full council at the end of November. So this is effectively just a summary of that. So I wasn't proposing, Chair, to go through that in any detail, but I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Okay, does anybody have any questions for Julie on it's stuff that we've already discussed? It's summarised. Nope, I think we're fine. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you very much. Shall I move straight on to item 9 then, Chair?
Yes, that would be great. Yeah. Oh, do we need to note that?
Yeah, sorry,
Chris?
Can we have a proposal in a second?
I propose that we note. Councillor Rollison to second. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, straight on to number 9.
Thank you. So now we've closed off 1920. Our focus has now obviously shifted to preparations and planning for 2021. Mm-hmm. And so this progress report, it's in the usual format. It just gives you an update as to where we are with things. But there are a couple of specific areas just for me to draw to your attention within that progress report. If I refer to page, sorry, what's the page number? It's page 5 of our report, which is page 35 of your papers. It does pick up on some other areas of work in addition to the main accounts and value for money work that we undertake. And that relates to the work we do on the certification of claims and returns, and specifically for this authority is the audit of the housing benefit return that goes to the Department for Work and Pensions. So that work has now been concluded. So not in a normal year, that work has to be concluded by the end of November, but obviously with the additional issues around lockdown and COVID this year, the DWP did extend that deadline to the end of January to conclude that work. So we summarised there the key findings from that. It's not unusual to find errors in the testing that we do within housing benefits. This council is by no means an outlier. If you think about the level of precision with these claims in terms of reviewing entitlements, checking calculations, etc., it's very, very rare that you get a council that is completely clean of errors. Unfortunately, because of the methodology that the DLP require us to follow, if you find an error of whatever magnitude, whether it be a couple of pence or a couple of pounds or something more significant, you have to follow what they call their 40+ methodology, which effectively means for every error, for that nature of error, you have to test 40 additional cases to be able to determine the extent of that error across the whole of the caseload to which that error relates. So it is quite an extensive amount of testing. So I just want to make sure that even though there is errors reported, that members see that in the context of the work that we have to do in that area. So we've highlighted there just some items that were identified on that. Obviously, I've talked to you about the change of the engagement team with Gail coming in. And so the main part of our progress report then is on page 34 of your papers, which is then talking about where we are with the risk assessment process for 2021. So moving specifically onto the financial statements audit side of things for the moment, there are not a huge amount of changes this year in terms of the actual code that governs how your accounts pull together. So I'm sure your finance officers are pleased that there's no major sort of technical changes as such to have to contend with the account. So we're starting our sort of planning and risk assessment work at the moment. And indeed, you'll see for the item that's next in the agenda, that actually shows you some of the initial risk assessment that we are considering and engaging with both management and those charged with governance to inform that risk assessment. One of the big areas of change that you will see as a committee this year is in the value for money work. So there's a new code that has come in from the 1st of April last year, issued by the National Audit Office, and that has changed the framework in which we undertake our value for money work for 2021. So as you'll see from the annual audit letter in the previous agenda item, in previous years, alongside the opinion we give on the accounts, we've given a separate opinion on your value for money arrangements. And the new code framework, that binary conclusion of qualified, unqualified, as far as your VFM is concerned, that has now gone. And what the NEO's requirements now have sort of moved towards is a much broader narrative around your arrangements across the organisation. So where in previous VFM assessments, we've done our risk assessment, we've identified particular risks, and we have focused exclusively on those risk areas, and then reported by exception if there are any issues. This new VFM framework is much broader in scope, in that it looks at 3 sort of key areas, key themes around your financial sustainability and medium-term financial planning, around the governance arrangements for the council as a whole, and then around your arrangements for ensuring value for money, economy, efficiency and effectiveness in how you deliver value for money. And within that, there are specific criteria that we're required to look at as part of that assessment. And then when we conclude on that, we don't give an opinion, but we will come to you with a separate report at the end of the year, at the same time that we give you your opinion on the accounts. And we will present that in what we call an annual auditor's report. So there's a new reporting requirement to report our final VFM findings, and that won't just be a report by exception. It will be a report that actually gives you lots of positive assurances as well about the things that you're doing well, as well as the things that we would consider any council needs to improve. If you move on to page, let me find the page again. So if you move on to page 40 of your papers, which is page 10 of our report, you'll actually see in there a bit more of information about what will be included in that auditor's annual report, but also then specifically how we will then present recommendations. So the new VFM code brings in this concept, this definition of significant weaknesses. So whilst we will not be qualifying an audit opinion if we found something wrong, we have the ability within this new framework to identify where we consider there are significant weaknesses in an authority. And then any areas where we think there will be a significant weakness in those arrangements, we are required to issue what we call a key recommendation. A key recommendation is required in any instance where we've identified a significant weakness. You can see from that table that there is also an opportunity to issue sort of a lower grade of recommendation called an improvement recommendation. And that's generally just given an opportunity for added value where we think there's scope for the authority to improve its arrangements, but it doesn't have the same sort of status as a key recommendation. And then in terms of statutory recommendations, those will only ever be used in exceptional circumstances, and there's specific statutory legislation about how those recommendations will need to be dealt with and responded to in a public council meeting. So those powers would only ever be used in sort of exceptional circumstances, but at least kind of gives you sort of an idea as to how the reporting arrangements will change and under the new VFM code. So Chair, I'll leave it at that at the moment, just in terms of sort of an intro, but I'd be very happy to take any questions. I know that's a lot to sort of take in a very sort of condensed sort of presentation. Yeah,
no, it is a lot, and it's interesting to see the changes. I mean, I've just got a couple of comments. I know we sort of said the 40+ methodology, you know, if you found a few pence difference, then you know you've got to go through 40+ cases. Well, at the end of the day, it's public money, so we've got to make sure we get it right, haven't we? And with so much new detail in this report, you know, we've been extended until January. Does it look like we're on track for getting that done?
So that is already complete. So that was right. January, as in January just passed.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah,
that's all been completed and submitted now. So that's already been submitted to the DWP. So that work for 1920s return has now been concluded.
Okay, done. Right. Okay, thank you. Okay, questions. Bill first, and then Chris.
Julie, that was very detailed, really. My sort of thing is with these new approaches to value for money. You say there might be significant weaknesses. I'm trying to imagine what a weakness might be, or what it might look like, what you might have actually seen and noticed, and then make recommendations about. That's the thing.
Sure, of course. I mean, if we were to look at the example of financial resilience, so if we looked at that pillar, for example, you know, an example of that would be a council that had inadequate monitoring arrangements in place to monitor its budget and financial position, or an authority that had set a savings plan, but actually the savings that they'd set weren't realistic, or didn't have any sort of detailed informed business cases behind it. It's just kind of a sort of finger in the air. We think we're going to save this amount on X. It needs to be much more informed on that. So that could be just one example of what could be a significant weakness. You know, on things like governance, you know, if you didn't have appropriate governance structures in place to consider sort of key decisions and reports on particular areas, that could be, you know, an example of a governance failing. So, you know, the sorts of things, you know, if we were looking at, you know, some of the work that internal audit does, for example, you know, if you had, you know, an area of the council's governance where they've raised some significant internal control weaknesses, you know, we would have to have a look at that and take a view as to whether that is isolated enough, or is it quite significant in terms of the strategic impact that control weakness has across the organisation. So it is very much a judgmental view, and within the firm we will have moderation processes that we will carry out across all of our local authorities to make sure that anything that we are designating in that sort of significant weakness category, that there is kind of consistency in the way that we're applying that across different organisations, so that we're not being unduly harsh or generous from one authority to another.
Just on that, the value for money this is, and because those points obviously come up under the other terms of the audit as well, with problems with governance and all that sort of stuff. Are the two close together now, value for money and the ordinary audit report, or are they still very separate things, really?
They are quite separate. I suppose there is a little bit of crossover. So if we looked at the council's arrangements for how you prepare your accounts, so your financial processes, your financial controls, in terms of the timeliness of your reporting, etc. Now there is some crossover there in terms of governance, because governance is very much concerned around the internal control framework of the authority. So there will be some read across to that. If you had good arrangements in place for preparing your accounts, that would normally suggest that you don't have any risk of significant weakness as far as the governance side of things is concerned. But in terms of the way that the new framework is structured, they're very much trying to sort of detach the VFM as much as possible from the account side of things, which is why we now have that sort of dual reporting. So whilst there will be consideration and reference to the two aspects being the accounts and the VFM work, effectively they can be run as two separate processes as far as our work is concerned.
Okay, thanks very much for that.
Thank you. Chris.
Yeah, hello, Julie. I hadn't heard one of these terms before. With regard to the housing benefit on page 5, you quoted, this enabled us to agree a cell amendment of £149.69. In what context is a cell agreement? Is this some sort of invoice where there was a supplementary invoice tacked on and it failed to be paid, or in this? I know it's about housing benefit, but what is this 149.61 in the context of your report?
Yes, thanks for the question, Councillor. So effectively, the return that the authority prepares and sends to the DWP, that return, it goes over about a dozen pages from recollection, and each there's a number of boxes, what we're referring to as cells in this case. So each box will have a cell reference number, so cell 1 through to, I can't remember the final number, Gail, I don't know if you can, but it's say 150. There's various number cells, and that will capture lots of different financial data about the types of housing benefit expenditure that the authority has incurred over the course of the year. It will break down things like the levels of benefit that has been overpaid to different claimants, and the sort of categorization of those overpayments as to whether it was overpayments that the claimant had failed to tell you about quickly enough, or whether there was delay in processing overpayments in terms of the authority had received the information but just took a bit of time to process them. Depending on the classification of all those different overpayments, that will attract different levels of subsidy to the authority. So that's why it's broken down into lots of different details. So effectively, for this particular item, we're effectively saying one of those cells had to be adjusted by £149, which was adjusted by the authority before they resubmitted their return to the DWP. Does that help?
Well, that sort of answers my question in a very technical way.
It's all very technical.
Will we giving back 140 now, or will we paying it extra?
I knew you were going to ask that. I can't remember which way it was.
All right. Okay,
but I can certainly find that detail and circulate that around to everyone.
What you've said, and leave it at that. I think you've justified more or less what I was asking, but sometimes I think I live in the real world too much. Thank you.
No problem.
Have we got any more questions on that item for Julie? No, that's great. Thank you. So are we happy to note that item? I'm happy to propose it. Mary to second it. Thank you, Councillor Cockliffe. Lovely, thank you. Okay, my goodness, item 10 already.
Chair, thank you very much. So as I said, I sort of kind of started to introduce this as part of the last item. And so we're just trying to formalise a lot more of what we're doing at the risk assessment stage with the authority. And one of the things that is changing as part of the requirements for the accounts this year, whilst there's not a huge amount of changes from the council side in terms of you've not got a whole load of new accounting requirements to worry about, there are actually quite a lot of changes happening from the audit side in terms of whilst the authority has to prepare the accounts to accounting standards, we have to audit to auditing standards that are issued by the Financial Reporting Council. And there's a new auditing standard that has come in for this year's audit that talks all around around estimates and any estimation that's required by the authority as part of its preparation of the accounts. There was a slide in the previous progress report that talks in a little more detail around that if anybody wanted some further information. And so what we want to make sure is that we're engaging in the right way at the right time now with both management and those charged with governance to make sure that they, in accordance with these new considerations under these new auditing standards, to make sure that you're having the ability to inform our risk assessment as we start to plan the audit for this year. I appreciate the nature of this document is quite technical because it asks us to consider the different estimates and compliance with laws and regulations, consideration around fraud, etc., etc. These are all requirements that are laid out to us as part of our requirements of the auditing standards. So effectively what we've done is we've provided this document to the authority and both your Section 151 officer and your audit manager has provided some input to this document and is put before this committee for your consideration. So I think really what we're looking for from you as members is, do you recognise the comments that officers are making? Do you support those? Are there any additional comments from your perspective that you wish to add to that before we effectively pull together our final risk assessment for this year's work? So I'll leave it at that, Chair, but I don't know, Sue, if there's anything else you wanted to add to that in terms of your contributions to it.
No, thank you, Julie. Nothing particular to add, but as Julie said, there's a lot of information to take in there. So even if not at this meeting, if members want to come back to me afterwards to query anything in the boxes, please feel free. And regarding the frauds, what I could do is share with you the fraud and risk analysis that I've mentioned both in here and in my report earlier, because again, that will give you an overview of the sorts of fraud we consider across the council. It might help as well. But more than happy to engage with any members over the content of this, even if not now, at a later date. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to say that there's quite a lot there to get your head around, and I think we need to think. I did have to smile to myself. Page 54, the very first question: what do you regard as the key events or issues that will have a significant impact on financial statements for 2021? COVID-19. You just put nothing else. That's just had such a significant impact on all of us, hasn't it? And particularly on this. So. Yeah, does anybody else have any more questions? Chris?
Well, I would just say on that, I'm not really sure that I'm qualified enough to be able to put any input into it, really. I think it's asking quite a lot of us as councillors to comment on the rights and the wrongs sort of thing on this one, but I don't know what other members think.
It's almost maybe worth putting out to the wider membership of the council, where there might be some different kind of expertise. I mean, obviously this will go to the executive, or the executive will have eyes on it. But yeah, I agree with you. There's a hell of a lot there. And I'm not sure some of us are qualified to make comments or make judgments on it. But that's an interesting point. Sorry, Sue.
One way you could approach it is just to view it as, when you read through, is there anything that the audit committee are aware of that's not commensurate with what's written here? I mean, that's right. Possibly a very simplified way of looking at it. When you read it, if something rings a bell as, well, they say they do that, but that's not what they told us last month, and or any other knowledge just, is it commensurate with what you as members have heard at audit committee or out of audit committee throughout the year? It's just a bit of a comparison, really. That could be a way of viewing it.
That's really useful. Thank you. It just clarifies it. Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you very much. Does anybody else have any more questions on item 10 on this? It's it's quite a significant report. No, my goodness. Well, record time, I think. Before are we happy to note that report? I'm happy to propose it. Do I have a seconder? Yeah, Councillor Goodman-Bradbury. Well, I think that's a record. That's 39 minutes, 10:39. That must be right. The last one was 10:45, 45 minutes. So I think we've broken our record. However, this was a fairly simple agenda. It's the usual things that we do every year. It's July that people are going to need to brace themselves for, because I think that's going to be a bit of a longer haul there. So but thank you, everybody, and obviously have a look through that item 10 again, and with the advice that Sue's given us, I think that would be worth looking at in more detail. And I shall obviously mention it to the executive members as well. But no, thank you very much. Does anybody else have any comments before we go? Julie?
Yes, Chair, it was just really to say that if any members do have any subsequent comments that they'd like to sort of feed through to us, please feel free to email those to either myself or to Gail, or if you want to put, sorry, I don't want to nominate Sue, but Sue, if you're happy to collate any to send them through, that would be absolutely fine as well.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, I personally, I find Sue extremely helpful, and is always willing at the end of the phone to answer questions and queries. So, obviously go through her, go through me, and that's very, very useful. So yes, so people are happy. We've noted and proposed and seconded every item on our agenda. So, oh, Chris, sorry, Chris, I can see your hand waving there.
I was just saying it's what's dropped off the agenda. It seems to be there. So there any future work program. We used to have one or two, these meetings, some of them tend to be quite short meetings, as this one's proved to be.
Yes.
And
yes,
we have had people come and talk about our insurance policy and this sort of thing.
Yeah.
Which
I think we're aware of that. I think if this was normal times, we might be doing that, the extra curricular, if you see what I mean. But I think because the teams are so stressed because of the current situation, we're trying to keep things like that to a minimum. But when we get back to normal,
I'll accept that.
Yeah, but actually, as a future work program, it would be useful to have that maybe a little bit in advance. Just for if that would be okay, because then people know what to expect, because obviously this is a short one, but July's meeting is going to be a little bit longer, so it might be useful for members to know that.
I have actually got a future work program. It's a bit light at the moment, because I'm not 100% sure on what's coming at the moment. I'll talk to a few people afterwards and see if I can get it maybe sent out to councillors after this, maybe.
That'd be
if you wanted
great.
to see what was coming up.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good point, Chris. That would be useful. Thank you very much. Okay, so if people are happy, I'm going to close the meeting. Thank you very much. Thank you, Julie and Gail, for joining us. And thank you all very much for all your work. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all. Yeah.
Take care.
Everyone.
Cheers all.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.